Good day, everybody. In today's content, we focus on Velo and its major support blocks for where we could potentially see a bullish reversal. Nothing that I say is financial advice. Let's dive into the content. So coming over to the weekly time frame, in my last few updates, we were looking at the loss of this ascending support that's been holding since the all-time low. Now, we did lose this ascending level of support about 3 weeks ago, and you can see that we're started to roll over, and we have in fact, or are actually this week, sweeping below our support block 1. Now, this support block 1 was the prior low from April of 2025 and was also this sort of higher low double bottom here from August of 2024. So this week, you can see the candle is actually quite forcefully being pushed down here, and unless we secure the close above 0.009, then Velo does look to be pulling back to support block 2, which does sit at 0.007/6. Okay, now this support block 2 is an interesting area as it was the previous lows from July of 2024, and we also had the wick low in August 2024. So we've lost the first support block, and if we get the weekly close below that, then the minimum I would expect is support block 2, where we could see some potential relief. Now, at this moment in time, we do have a really tight sort of compression on the RSI. We have been placing these lower highs ever since actually sort of May 2024. Now, we did have this bearish divergence on the the RSI from this May 2024 high, because we placed lower highs, and in the price action we had these higher highs at the 0.038 high. So we had lower highs in the RSI at this point and higher highs in the price. This was a bearish divergence. Now, since that bearish divergence and tapping out at 0.038, this is where Velo had that sort of 5-wave correction back down to a level of support, which was this April low of 2025. We then had a rally in the RSI to a lower high than the previous high from December, and inside that we had this ABC run up, which created a lower high in price too. So what we're sort of looking at here is we had a high where we then placed a lower high, which indicated depleting buying pressure. Our support line was the ascending level of support, this white trend line, and we was looking for a bounce in this apex to either break to the upside or to roll over and look for our support blocks. So you can evidently see with the sort of capitulation in the market a few weeks ago, Velo did have this nasty wick down, which was about 35%. It did bring it back down to the support block 1, but it is losing it this week. So we essentially lost the apex, we lost the level of support, and right now we are currently also losing support block 1 at 0.009, which means that we are ultimately looking for 0.006 if we fail to close above support block 1. Now, in the meantime, the RSI is creating lower lows here. Okay, so you've got lower lows in the RSI, but at the same time, we are also in the chart at the moment. Now, I'm not saying this is the divergence formed, but we do have from this sort of, from this July 2024 low, we are currently sitting above that. So we're currently still in some sort of higher low structure, whilst we have lower lows on the RSI. So a potential divergence, a bullish divergence, is building. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's currently formed, or its strength, should I say, is at the moment relatively weak. But there is a potential here to be forming a bullish divergence on the RSI, especially as it is entering levels of oversold. So in the RSI, I do apologize. In the RSI, once you get below levels of 20, you are in oversold territory. Now, zooming out a little bit more, we haven't actually been at these levels of the RSI, which currently sit at roughly around, where are we? We're about 36 in the RSI. Now, the last time that Velo was at this level in the RSI was back in sort of January 20 or February 2023. Okay, so it's been a couple of years since being down at this level. And at that point in time, the price of Velo, where should we have a look? We was looking at sort of January 2023. The price of Velo was around 0.001. Okay, so even being at this point here, fast forward to 2025, we have higher lows than that 0.001, and we are still, or sorry, should I say, we are at levels of 35 in the RSI, again, that haven't been seen since then, and we are definitely forming a higher low than that 0.001 previous area. So At the moment, I think what we're looking at here is for Velo's RSI to get pretty overextended to the downside. Okay, if we do pull back to support block 2, I think that this is where the divergence could get strong, and we could see a bullish divergence where Velo comes back down to levels not seen since the all-time low in 2022. So if the RSI does start to draw back down here and Velo does come back down to support block 2, I think this may offer a fantastic opportunity to see a bounce. Okay, so the RSI essentially is tying up with this pullback on Velo and the retracement to support block 2, and if we do get into levels that haven't been seen since sort of 2022 at the all-time low, I think this would be a key signal to say that we could be looking for a bounce or a reversal pretty soon. Again, I don't want to try and catch a falling knife or, try pick the bottom, you get smelly fingers. But we do have support block 2, which is what I'm keeping my eyes on right now at 0.006. And if that does come into fruition, I would expect the RSI to at least approach levels of 30. I do apologize. Below 30 is when you're entering sort of extremely oversold levels. And when you're above levels of 70, this is when you're overbought. Okay, so Velo is very close to entering oversold territory in its RSI. It's pulling back to its support block 2 after losing this ascending support and failing to currently hold support block 1 at 0.009. And in the stock RSI, there is also another tale. Because at this moment in time, Velo is in the floor and very overextended to the downside on its stock RSI. And the last two occasions from March, April 2025 and June, July of 2024, these are areas that have marked the low for Velo. So if we tie it up with the charts and we get these lows on here, you will see that these lows over time are where the stock RSI is extremely overextended. Okay, so if we go back down here, I'll get a vertical line on just to make it a bit more easier for us to see. On all of these occasions where the stock RSI was overextended, this is where Velo placed a bullish cross on the weekly stock RSI and then rallied to a new local high. Now, the only time on this occasion that it hasn't happened is when we actually formed the bullish cross in April 2025. And at this point, when we formed the bullish cross on support block 1, we saw an A, B, C rally into this resistance. Okay, and this is where we placed a lower high, which indicated that depleting buying pressure. And again, then we've lost this support a few weeks after that, and which is why we're seeing the retracement back down to these support blocks. So what I'm trying to say is, okay, there is depleting buying pressure. The lower highs are a bit of a concern, and they did play a part with obviously losing this ascending support, which is why Velo is seeing quite a drastic sort of drawdown. Now, again, this support level was holding for a couple of years. Losing it, you would expect some sort of nasty pullback, okay, and that's exactly what we're getting here. But let's not look at Velo as an outlier. I think that the whole market, especially a lot of altcoins and the lower cap that it gets, a lot of them are very still risk off. And in comparison to some, I know comparison could be a thief of joy, but there's many other altcoins that have actually placed new all-time lows and are struggling to actually retain any sort of structure at the moment. And that's why I think a lot of the market is very, very fearful. But nonetheless, at this moment in time, although Velo is pulling back quite harshly here, there are signals in these indicators like the RSI, which is getting very overextended to the downside, placing that lower low structure whilst we still have a higher low than the July 2024 low, and also the stock RSI, which is at levels where in previous sort of areas and territories in the past, we've seen very strong bounces from. So there are signals that are hinting that a low is very close. Again, I don't want to try and pick the bottom and get them sort of smelly fingers. As I said, you don't want to catch a falling knife, but it does look like we're on the cusp of potentially seeing a reversal very, very soon. Now, it does look like Velo has ultimately had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks of continuous downside here. Okay, and there's a lot of negative sentiment on X. I'm seeing it everywhere at the moment. And I think the last time we actually had this much or this many weeks of depth of correction, okay, looking at about 6 weeks, the last time we actually had something like this was probably back here. Okay, so when we actually placed this high in May 2024, and Velo had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks before it even saw any sort of relief. This was a maybe 7 to 8 week correction. It was relatively sharp. We was looking at, I think this was about a 75, 76% correction. But what followed from that point, okay, where everybody would have been fearful, was a move up to 0.038, which was a 4.5x. Now, again, let's look at the next macro correction, going from 0.0038 back down to 0.008, 77% correction. At this point, Velo then rallied another sort of 140% up to 0.02. So, you know, down at these levels, historically over the past sort of couple of years, there are telltale signs that relief is on the cards or the horizon pretty soon. Now, we do also need to consider Bitcoin at this moment in time. And if we look at the sort of Bitcoin dominance, Ethereum dominance, and altcoins as an overall, at the moment, Bitcoin dominance sits at 59%. Okay, so it retains nearly 60% of the overall market share in all of the crypto space. Ethereum is at roughly 12.7%, and altcoins, anything other than Bitcoin and Ethereum, are sitting at 28%. I do believe that includes stables as well. Now, what we're going to look for, what we potentially want to see in Bitcoin dominance, okay, for Velo, for example, to start seeing some relief is a massive crash. So back here in 2017, Bitcoin dominance had this whopping crash, and you can see this gray line here. This is altcoins, okay, and stables and whatever else, everything other than Bitcoin and Ethereum. This is where altcoins really started to pick up. Okay, so when Bitcoin dominance was crashing, this is where others or altcoins were picking up and had a lovely rally. Same within 2021. Okay, Bitcoin dominance fell. This was on the, where did it top out? On the 1st of November 2021, it crashed drastically. And then on the 1st of November, we also saw altcoins start to pick up. And this was the alt season in 2021. Now, we've seen Bitcoin dominance right here have a lovely climb. I say lovely, okay? But Bitcoin is in a bull run. And dominance, I think, is evidence of this, okay? And of course, with Bitcoin putting new all-time highs in October, I think, again, this just goes to show that Bitcoin is still in a bull market. It's just altcoins are struggling to find their feet whilst dominance is making its mind up on what it wants to do. On all prior occasions, okay, on all prior occasions, you can see Bitcoin dominance rolled over, placed a lower high, then rolled over again. In previous cycles, we could see it placed a high here, rolled over, had another high, which is where altcoins got absolutely battered, okay? And this was heading into sort of April 2021. And then it rolled over, and this is where we saw altcoins pick up. So what we want to see is essentially Bitcoin dominance put in a lower high here and roll over heading into the next couple of months in Q4, possibly into Q1 2026. And this is where others and altcoins could pick up, which would be a good sign for Velo. So right now, my overall thoughts is Bitcoin retains most of the dominance and most of the market share, which means that altcoins are still risk off until we see that change. And of course, Velo is not any different from any other altcoin in that aspect, okay? You can have tons of projects that are building fundamentally, just like Velo is, but they could still be underperforming price-wise because Bitcoin is just retaining most of the market share. When there's fear in the markets, people resort back to stables, they resort back to Bitcoin for safety. And I think that's evidence of what's going on right now. There's a lot of uncertainty, so people are resorting to safer assets, which is at the cost of Velo depreciating in price. And again, Velo is not an outlier. There are other projects that have placed new all-time lows and are struggling to keep up with the market. But however, as I said, there are several signals here that are pointing to a local bottom being placed very, very soon, if not already being in. Okay, so what we're actually looking for now is to hold these lows of July 2024. Okay, and if Velo can come down in this sort of nasty correction, come back down to 0.007/6, build a double base, this is where we want to see the sort of journey start picking up. Okay, and we did expect it to take off sooner. We did, guys. But again, we have to sort of adjust to the market. We have to adjust to the conditions. And this is what I'm here to help you guys with. Okay, we've lost that ascending support. It's been nasty, and it feels like the end. Okay, but that would have felt the same on this correction. It would have felt the same on this correction. It would have felt the same on this correction. But every time it's continued to push higher. Okay, other than this correction or impulsive wave here, where we had this A, B, C, and at the start of the video, I was saying to you guys, this is where we're getting depleting buying pressure. Okay, we've got these lower highs, and essentially we're starting to roll over. So we lost that ascending level of support. We had these lower high structures, and right now we're in quite a nasty correction, looking for a key level of support. And at the same time, the RSI and stock RSI are hinting at a potential bullish reversal in the coming weeks. So I don't have any fear here. I mean, the only scenario, in my honest opinion, the worst case scenario that I would be looking at, and this was pointed out to me by Bobby Axe on X, okay, would be some sort of head and shoulders structure where we had this level of ascending support, and you know, it's not perfect, I'll be honest. This would be seen as a left shoulder, this would be seen as a head, and then this right here would be seen as the right shoulder. Okay, something like this. Again, it's not a perfect head and shoulders structure, but nonetheless, you could look at it as a potential head and shoulders. Now, if Velo does sort of come and meet this target with confluence, this could be bringing it back down to 0.003/4. Okay, but at the moment, I don't see that. As I said, these indicators are hinting at a potential low or bullish reversal on the cards, but let's not ignore that potential play as well. Okay, and if it does come into fruition and we start losing 0.006, then that would be a likely scenario. But for now, that is not the case. What I think is the case is this leading diagonal contracting expanding. Now, I shared this on the 12th of October. And I said that what we're actually in right now is this B wave. Okay, so essentially what you get is 5 waves up, which creates an A wave. And we're in this sort of rising wedge, it looks, so to speak. And then from that 5th wave, we have this B wave correction to a key level of support. And within this, you've got potentially an A, B, C correction, okay, which would mark the wave B before the euphoric wave C. So this is called a leading diagonal contracting expanding ABC structure. And this is the potential play, or the play that I'm looking at currently, so to speak, primarily because we're actually losing support block 1. We're losing the April lows. We're losing the July lows of August lows of 2024. So what we're potentially looking at is the B wave being completed, the B wave being completed on this fib support base. Now, support block 1, which I was showing you at the start of the video, was the 0382 Fibonacci at 0.0095. Velo still has the chance to hold this low, but we need to see weekly closes above this level, multiple weekly closes, in order to invalidate retracing back to 0.006. Okay, and this, in my honest opinion, is where the B wave before the C wave takes off is likely to be. I say likely because I don't have the exact answer, guys. I know I have this if, when, I'm showing you what the charts are telling me. Okay, it's data over emotion. We've lost that support. This was a structure that I was looking at back in May, I believe. And, I didn't expect it at the time, but it's coming to fruition. It is what it is. We have to adjust and we keep moving. I think Velo has strong fundamentals. It's a great project. And in my honest opinion, this is an area of opportunity. It was in the past. Whenever Velo has had corrections of a similar sort of depth, of 70 sort of plus size, right now you could say from this local high at 0.02, we're down about 60%. In previous corrections from 0.038, we had a 77% correction. From the 0.028 highs, we had a 75% correction. So if Velo was to say, again, place a 70 odd percent correction, you're looking at roughly 0.0058/6. And if it gets to 75, you're looking at sort of 0.005. Okay, so again, not far off that support target that we're looking at here on the fib support base. We've got 0.0062. So worst case scenario, if we replicate a 75% correction from these 0.02 highs, you're looking at a 0.005. Okay, 0.006/0.005. There's a high likelihood that that's a potential scenario. And just if I get the drawings on here, it might make it a little bit more evident where we've had this sort of 5-wave move up. Let's draw the leading diagonal on here very quickly. You've got this ascending level of support, which Velo lost. Let's get that up here. It's going to look quite shifty at the moment. But yeah, you've got this sort of 5-wave move up. You could call it a rising wedge, a rising channel, however you want to call it. In fact, you could even look at it as a potential structure like this, okay, where Velo actually lost this support back in March, ran into the previous support as resistance on this 0.02 high, and is now being rejected quite harshly. And in this sort of scenario, you can see this is a 1, this is a 2, this is a 3, this is a 4, this is a 5, and then what we've got right now is potentially an A, a B into resistance, and right now this C wave back down to 0.006/5 before essentially then getting the major break up to our 38 cents targets. And again, this is a leading diagonal contracting, expanding ABC structure. So I honestly believe that Velo is in this macro B wave, okay? The A into the B, 050 slash, if we do have a sort of 75% correction again, the 050, say that 4 times, or this sort of 0.005 territory. That's ultimately what I'm looking at here, guys. So at the moment, it does look shaky, it does look risky, it does look pretty nasty. And if you include the drop from 0.038, let's be honest, there would be a lot of people that was actually buying this local top. And so far, we're down about 80%. Okay, so if you're including this 0.038 high, this macro correction was larger than all of the prior corrections, I think, other than the correction from sort of, what was this sort of depth here that we actually had. This was, I think, about an 87%. This was an 87% drop from 0.014 back down to 0.001, 87%, okay, 88%. But what came after was an absolutely enormous rally of about a 15x. If you include the 0.038 highs, this was about a 20x. So the greater the retrace, the greater the impulsive pace. The further you correct, the larger the recovery could be. Now, as I said, at this point in time in the cycle, Bitcoin is in a bull run. Bitcoin is in a bull run. I don't think many can argue with that. Bitcoin's putting in new all-time highs. In October, it placed a new all-time high at 126K. Could it be the local top? I honestly don't think so. I think there's still a lot of euphoria to come. There's signals on Bitcoin. I think even a lot of the market cycle indicators haven't even hit. The pure multiple status is currently sitting just above undervalued. Crypto market cycle indicators hit 0 out of 30. Okay, and this is the crypto market cycle top indicators are a collection of 30 indicators that help users assess whether the crypto market is likely reach the top of its cycle. The likelihood is increased as more indicators are triggered. 0 of those indicators have been triggered. If we look at the Bitcoin rainbow chart, it's down at levels of, the blue is rather cold. This is kind of close to the lows. When you get to the reds, which is where a lot of these peaks are in the Bitcoin chart, these have identified previous local tops. Now, it's obvious that, this is diminishing returns. Over time, it's getting flatter. But that's not to say that we're not still in territory that could see Bitcoin pick up to new all-time highs. So, and even looking at the Pi cycle top indicator, on all occasions in prior cycles, we've seen the Pi cycle top nail a local top. We haven't seen a push, okay, above the 350-day EMA, 350-day moving average times 2. This green line, okay, if you look at this green line, on every occasion, Bitcoin's local top in any cycle has pushed above it. Just slightly here, we've pushed above it. Right here, we pushed above it. This cycle has not seen a rally above the 350-day MA times 2. So, and this could go on and on and on. None of the signals have been triggered. So with that being said, I honestly think the market is just going through a massive phase of manipulation. And this is designed to throw you off guard, to throw you off course, especially for altcoins. And evidence of that is Bitcoin dominance still sitting at 60% this late in the cycle. So yes, it's been a longer drawn out process. Yes, altcoins are getting battered. Yes, there's a lot more meme coins. Yes, there's a lot more dilution. But that's not to say that blue chip projects and projects with strong fundamentals are not going to see a rally in the coming months. Sentiment can, and I believe will, change in the blink of an eye. And that will also be the case for Velo once it decides to find its low, in my opinion, in this B-wave structure leading into the C, which would take us up to 39 cents, 38 cents. Let's put it this way. Let's look at the sort of move, right? If Velo does, let's say, for example, come down to 0.05/6, and then we get the rally up to 38 cents, that move would be a 64x. Okay, a 64x. Now, in comparison to when we was looking at it back at these 0.038 highs, at this point, it would have been an 8x. So the risk to reward at these levels has drastically increased, whilst Bitcoin is still in a bull run. Whilst Bitcoin dominance has been climbing for several years, but had a massive drop in July and is still sitting below that high of roughly 66%. So Bitcoin dominance has already given us some of those signals, in my honest opinion. You know, it's had a rollover. Bitcoin's placed a new all-time high. There's still risk-off attitude on the market, which is why dominance is still relatively high and people are resorting back to Bitcoin. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to have an alt season. Again, none of the cycle target indicators have been triggered. So, you know, looking at data, which I like to kind of put as an aspect over emotion, others right now are sitting relatively low, less than 30% of the market share. I expect this to change drastically in the next 3 to 6, maybe even 9 months. Okay, the longer this takes, we could be in a super cycle. This could be a 5-year extension cycle instead of a 4. It could be different this time. It could be. You need to give it the benefit of the doubt. This is a crypto market. It's a volatile space. Institutions are here. The big players don't want the small frogs to get anything from the pond. Okay, we're tadpoles in comparison to what's above us. And I honestly think this is a massive manipulation tool. Anything to do with politics, Trump, tariffs, you know, escalations of war. There's always something that comes up, but the market always recovers. Again, all of the news that we had, let's look at, you know, for example, from COVID. The recovery was the greatest recovery we'd seen in the crypto space. And it led to absolutely parabolic runs. But no one would have thought that. We've gone through the largest liquidation event in crypto history a couple of weeks ago. We need time to heal, yes. But does it mean it's over? Definitely not. But that's the sentiment. That's the sentiment. I honestly thought the idea was buy the fear, sell the greed. Right now, we are nowhere near greed, and there are people selling left, right, and center. I find it quite crazy. And this is why I believe at this moment in time for Velo, yes, this is a very nasty correction. We've lost a macro level of support. We're pulling back very sharply for the last 5, 6, 7 weeks, but I think it will have an ending and the greatest recovery will come from it. I think this is the end of the beginning for loads of altcoins in the space, okay? Especially those with fundamentals, blue chips. You know, if we look at XLM, XRP, I still see them having a lot of gains to come, and they're showing great strength right now in the market. Okay, so the top blue chip altcoins are still way above the lows of last year, or their lows of last year, should I say. So, you know, yes, it gets shakier as you go down. You know, I've got extremely low micro cap projects that are subject to volatile price swings, but I believe in the fundamentals of the project. And that's why I hold those assets. Of course, you have to do your own research. You have to have convictions in your plays. So right now, you know, it gets frustrating because all I see on my comments is negative everything. But anyways, this is just my 2 pence, my honest thoughts. The last chart I wanted to share with you guys, I've gone off course now, I do apologize, is this chart here. Okay, which is again bringing Velo back down to this July 2024 support, which sits at 0.006. And at this moment in time, as I said, the RSI is getting really compressed, really tight as well. And we are at levels, of nearly being oversold. So we're closer to a low, in my opinion, than anywhere being near a high. This is an area where an opportunity is presenting itself. And if we can hold the July 2024 support, fantastic. Come back any lower, I will update you. Okay, but I think that this is the final sweep, okay? Just because, as I said, Bitcoin is at new all-time highs in October. I get it, it's pulled back now. But as long as it's above its bull market support band, which sits roughly at, I think it's about 96K. As long as Bitcoin's above 96K and seeing weekly closes above that, I have no concerns for this market. And I still believe that we are going to be heading into one massive parabolic run. Yes, the big fish don't want us to win, guys. Of course they don't. They want us to feel despair. They want us to feel blood. They want us to feel depressed. But that's what leads to the euphoria. Flush the weak hands, send the market. Institutions are buying left, right, and center. ETFs are everywhere. It just baffles me. In 2021, 2017, we knew regulations were coming. We knew they would not let us have it the easy way. Yet when it's here, we seem to lose our minds and think that it's all over. Welcome to the crypto space. Volatile, it is, but that's the beauty of it. I hope you've enjoyed the content, guys. From Chart Nerd TA, take care. Peace out.